It is 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. And coming up, the assisted dying debate finally has its moment in Parliament. But have MPs been given enough time to talk through a topic which has divided the country? On the eve of an historic Commons vote, the final arguments are being made, with the outcome still far from certain. We'll hear from campaigners on both sides, Prue Leith and the actress Liz Carr. Also ahead, another high-profile BBC presenter stands down following allegations of inappropriate behaviour. 13 women make complaints against the MasterChef star Gregg Wallace, including the former Newsnight presenter Kirsty Walk. High numbers and hot air, the accusations fly from politicians of all parties about who's to blame for huge immigration figures. But we'll take a calmer look at what today's announcement actually means. Plus, pensioners in Scotland are getting their winter fuel allowance reinstated from next year. So will the government in Westminster finally relent? All that's to come and much more on the UK Tonight. We'll have more on all those stories in just a moment, but we're going to start tonight with breaking news. And the Transport Secretary, Louise Haigh, has admitted to Sky News that she was convicted of an offence in connection with misleading the police just months before being elected as an MP in 2015. Now, in her current cabinet role, Ms Haigh is responsible for the British Transport Police. She was also Shadow Policing Minister under Jeremy Corbyn. Well, tonight she told us the Labour Party leadership was aware of her conviction before she joined the Shadow Cabinet. Let's bring in our political correspondent, Rob Powell, who broke the story. He joins us now from Westminster. Good evening to you, Rob. So what has been the response from Louise Haigh to you breaking this story?
So we approached Louise Hay's team a number of weeks ago, actually, with the broader story. The full facts went in more recently, and since then she has provided quite a lengthy account of what she says the circumstances were behind this conviction, this guilty plea that she entered at a magistrate's court in South London just 6 months before the 2015 general election, at a time when she had already been selected as the parliamentary candidate for Sheffield Heeley. Now, Sky News approached Louise Haig's team after we spoke to a number of sources who said that this conviction related to a false report to the police that Louise Haigh made ahead of the 2015 general election in the months before that, around a mobile phone being stolen. Now, she issued a statement essentially saying that this was a genuine mistake, boiled down to her making that mistake and then following solicitor's advice, something that she says she now regrets. She says that she was mugged in 2013, an experience that she says she found incredibly frightening and terrifying, and that after that she reported to police that a number of items had been stolen, including her work mobile phone. She said that sometime later she discovered that the mobile in question, had not actually been taken, but that in the interim she'd been given a new phone by her employer at the time, the insurance giant Aviva. Now, when that work phone was switched on, she says, that set off essentially alarm bells at the police. They pulled her in for questioning to ask about that, and she followed solicitor's advice to essentially say nothing, to make no comment, something she says she now regrets. Part of the statement went on also then to say, the police referred the matter to the CPS and I appeared before Southwark magistrates. Under the advice of my solicitor, I pleaded guilty, despite the fact this was a genuine mistake from which I did not make any gain. The magistrates accepted all of these arguments and gave me the lowest possible outcome, a discharge. That was in brackets, available. Now, so she is alleging that essentially this is a misunderstanding, that she followed advice that she now regrets, and that whilst, yes, she was convicted, she only pled guilty because she was following advice, and that the motive, essentially, the intention wasn't there. We've been told by 3 separate sources, though, that the reason why this false report was made to the police by Ms Haigh was because she stood to benefit personally. We've also been told by 2 separate sources that there was an internal investigation at Aviva, the insurance giant where she worked as a public policy manager, and that she was sacked over this incident. So I think there are significant unknowns. There is a gap between what we are hearing from our sources and what Louise Hay is saying in her statement, but the core of the story remains that the Transport Secretary, months before being elected to Parliament in 2015, did plead guilty and was convicted of an offence related to misleading the police. We know that the Labour leadership was aware of this when she was appointed to the Shadow Cabinet, and already this evening we have had Conservative spokespeople saying that Sir Keir Starmer has serious questions to answer over what he knew about this when he appointed Louise Hay to the Cabinet.
Rob Powell reporting there from Westminster. Now, tomorrow, MPs will finally get the chance to debate the terminally ill adults end of life bill, perhaps better known as the assisted dying bill. The public debate, though, has been going on for a lot longer. So far, both sides have put their arguments forcefully but respectfully. However, there remain considerable concerns that a debate lasting just a few hours is nowhere near long enough for a topic that divides families and communities in equal measure. Now, in a moment, we'll hear from high-profile campaigners on both sides, Prue Leith, as well as the actress Liz Carr. But first, Sky's Sadia Chowdhury has been speaking to some of the people who could potentially be most affected if the bill becomes law.
Claire and Philip are both terminally ill. Doctors say they may have months to live.
I was told that I had pancreatic cancer, which had also gone to the lungs.
It spread from my breast into pretty much all of my bones and my liver. I'm having palliative care at the moment.
When it comes to assisted dying, Claire and Philip have very different views. Here's Philip with his wife. Listen to what they're singing about. It may give you a clue on what he thinks.
I'm gonna trust in God, amen, by His grace, amen. I want to live until God wants me to die, and then He'll sort that out, not me. I have no idea how it's going to happen. I don't want to know.
For Philip, guidance from religion puts him against assisted dying.
I have been with people dying on more than one occasion, and I can say out of the people I've been with, apart from my mother, which was a long, long time ago when they didn't have the palliative care you've got now, they have not been in such pain. And so I see no reason why that palliative care should not be available for me.
Yeah, this valley in the spring is absolutely full of birdsong.
Claire lives on a farm.
Yeah.
Living and dying here isn't always up to nature.
A farmer would be prosecuted for allowing an animal to suffer. And yet, when it comes to human beings, for some reason, that seems to be okay.
Claire supports assisted dying, but says it's more than not suffering.
I would like to choose to die in a place, which is underneath the oak tree in my garden, at a time of my choosing. The branches go right the way over the roof of my house.
If the law doesn't change and change quickly, Claire says she'll choose to die alone.
I've got no intention of eking out every single second. So I would plan to take my own life. But as the law stands, I would have to do that alone. And I think that's really sad.
Philip is largely unaffected by the vote, but says he doesn't want to leave behind a Britain devoid of hope.
We needed to be encouraged. And that's why I sing that song, I'm so glad that I'm alive.
Both have had the choice over how they lived their lives. But for anyone to have choice over how life ends is now a matter for Parliament. Sadia Chowdhury, Sky News.
Well, the celebrity chef Prue Leith is a prominent campaigner for assisted dying. She's been speaking to my colleague Sophie Ridge.
It's such a difficult subject, and the public and MPs and everybody would rather not talk about it. And I think that is my greatest fear. I think that MPs will not be really considering this matter. They're not looking at both sides of the argument. They're not looking at the evidence. If they look at the evidence, they will definitely end up on my side of the argument, because it is so much easier to just abstain or vote for the status quo, which you think you're doing nothing. But of course, if you're voting for the status quo, you're voting for continuing a law which is cruel and not working. I think we're so behind in this. What's the matter with us? Little old England doesn't want to do it.
Now, Liz Carr is an actor that you'll recognise from shows like Silent Witness, and she's been campaigning against the assisted dying bill. I'm pleased to say Liz joins us now live. Liz, good evening to you. Thank you for making the time to speak to us tonight. Now, you have said that there are those who are fighting for the right to die. I'm fighting for the right to live. Do you feel threatened by the proposed changes in this law?
I do. I'm going to be outside Parliament. I've been campaigning. I'm exhausted. I just say that now. I'm absolutely exhausted, because I think all of us are, whichever side you're on, because we're so impassioned about this. I think whatever you believe, there's no denying that. It's important. There is that fear that if you introduce a law that gives doctors the power to assist certain groups of people to end their life, that will impact on, obviously, ill people. And there's a massive crossover there with disabled people, and we fear that there will be pressure and coercion. And I feel that personally for me and for many other disabled people.
And Liz, you will have heard the arguments then about the robust safeguards that are put in place. We had Lord Cameron just today saying that he had previously been against the change in the law, but because of the safeguards that are in place, he's now for it. You don't think the safeguards that you have seen are enough?
I'm not sure we were reading the same bill, because one of the things that's meant to be a safeguard is that doctors can bring this up. That's astonishing. We see that happening in Canada, where it's now available for people who are disabled with mental health issues. And what happens is doctors can suggest it. They can say, OK, this is difficult. Now let's think about the kind of power imbalance that we have in that doctor-patient relationship. It's once we go there, we're not going to go back. So we have to get this right. And this is honestly not the right bill. It's being rushed through. And it's frightening, in fact, that this is even getting to this stage.
Yeah, to be voted on tomorrow. I mean, Liz, you say this is not the right bill. I wonder then, does that suggest that you think there may be a bill, something in the law and the legislation that could be tweaked to give the people that, Prue Leith was speaking about, the right, if they are in what they feel like is intolerable suffering, to end their lives?
So what I see at the end of life is absolutely the stories of people who want this right. But I also hear about people who've become terminally ill because the waiting lists mean they've become terminal while waiting for treatment and for diagnosis. I see people who are being impacted by the benefit system to the degree that they take their own life. I'm seeing hospices having to close because of inadequate funding. We are not giving everybody in the UK a good end of life. And until we have sorted that out, we should not even be entertaining the idea of legalising assisted suicide.
You've spoken about the fear of coercion and the pressure that may well be put on people. Just talk to us about that in a bit more detail. I mean, as we say, coercion in this new bill is going to be made illegal. That's part of, I guess, the safeguards that are in place, that there'll be investigation properly if there's any sense that anyone has been coerced into making this decision.
So there's always that sense that coercion is going to be somebody else doing something malicious to you. And, of course, that is possible. Elder abuse is absolutely rife. So it is a possibility, and I do mean it in that sense. But I'm thinking of two other things. I'm thinking of self-coercion, which is actually you choosing it because it's the best of a bad bunch of options. So I don't want to put my family out. I don't want to spend that money that I've saved on my end of life. We should be solving those problems so that the person doesn't feel that the best solution is to end their life before they need to. At the same time, I think they should make it a crime in the bill, if it were to go through, of coercion by the state. Because I think that there are policies by this and the last government that mean people are suffering. So they're creating suffering during and at the end of life, and then to say, we will help you take your life because of the suffering we've created. No, we're not in a, when the context is that and the social situation is that, I don't think any safeguard currently will be safe enough.
I mean, Liz, the picture you paint there is a very dark picture. I mean, following through that line of thought takes us to a very, very disturbing place. You can't really think that those who are drafting this bill have got that as an end goal in mind.
No, I don't think anybody that's involved on either side of this wants anything other than the best for everybody. I think that's it. Often when you oppose, you're told that you want people to suffer. Absolutely not. But have we forgotten so quickly what happened during COVID at the beginning, those beginning years, and how certain groups of people were treated? And I think that showed us, be it blanket, do not resuscitate orders on older people, on ill people, on disabled people, and the way that certain lives basically were valued less, and that was a very difficult situation. I get that, but that was the system, that was the health, the NHS. So would I trust them with this? It's not that I think individuals are malicious and going to do things on purpose, but I'm saying that until we can offer people the support, I think I understand, or I do understand, why many would want to end their life, even whether just terminally ill or from a few more months than that, or with a disabling condition.
OK. Liz Carr, look, it's really been great to speak with you this evening. Thank you so much and for so powerfully putting across your argument. I wish you all the best, Liz. Thanks
for your time. Thank you.
All right, now, of course, we are going to have full coverage of the assisted dying debate tomorrow here on Sky News. It will begin at around 9 a.m. We're going to have special coverage throughout the day as MPs begin to debate and then, of course, vote on it later on in the day. Now, if you have been affected by anything that we have been discussing in this interview and in Sophie's interview as well, you can, of course, contact the Samaritans 24 hours a day. The number is 116 123 or joe@samaritans.org. Now, the BBC has become embroiled in yet another scandal after one of the corporation's most respected news presenters made allegations of inappropriate behaviour against the MasterChef star Gregg Wallace. Now, he stepped down from the show while a full investigation takes place following complaints made by the former Newsnight presenter Kirsty Walk, as well as 12 other people. And tonight, Sir Rod Stewart took to social media to accuse Wallace of humiliating his wife, Penny Lancaster, when she was a contestant on Celebrity MasterChef. Our arts and entertainment correspondent, Katie Spencer, has more.
You OK, guys? You're not getting cold out there? Mr Wallace, do you regret the inappropriate comments?
Seemingly unrattled, Gregg Wallace fielding questions from Sky News at his home.
Mr Wallace, would you like to apologise?
You've got 15 minutes left.
For almost 20 years as a co-presenter of MasterChef, he's been a familiar face on BBC One.
I really like the sharp, raw pineapple with the lime on it. That is proper zinging.
It is the language he's alleged to have used off-camera that's now landed him in hot water. Taken off air for now as the production company which makes the show looks into a number of complaints thought to have been made by 13 individuals and spanning 17 years, including former Newsnight presenter Kirsty Walk, who was disturbed by what she witnessed on Celebrity MasterChef.
There were two occasions in particular where he used sexualised language in front of a number of people. And it wasn't as if it was anyone engaged with this. It was completely one-way traffic. But I think people were uncomfortable.
The makers of MasterChef, Banijay, made aware of the complaints by the BBC.
Those allegations against Wallace aren't just about inappropriate sexual language. They reportedly include him taking his top off in front of a junior employee. Taxpayer funded, the corporation has said that because he is employed by an external production company, it is now on them to investigate what's gone on. But it's said that it's clear that any behaviour by one of its stars which falls below the standards it expects won't be tolerated.
Banijay UK saying whilst these complainants have not raised the allegations directly with our show producers, we feel that it is appropriate to conduct an immediate external review to fully and impartially investigate. While this review is underway, Gregg Wallace will be stepping away from his role on MasterChef and is committed to fully cooperating throughout the process. The new claims come after Wallace posted on Instagram saying he'd been cleared by a BBC investigation in 2018 after a complaint was made about alleged sexual comments he'd made when appearing on the show Impossible Celebrities.
The allegations were investigated 6 years ago, and my comments were found to be not sexual.
How the BBC manages its talent has been in sharp focus after the behaviour of a handful of its stars has ended up being called into question in the last 12 months. While Gregg Wallace himself has yet to comment on the claims directly, the BBC says the TV star's lawyers have told them it is entirely false that he engages in behaviour of a sexually harassing nature. The presenter stepping aside for now, but the BBC will still be airing shows Gregg Wallace appears in. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Now, no direct comment, but in the last few minutes, Gregg Wallace has released this video on Instagram. Have a look.
I would like to thank all the people getting in touch, reaching out and showing their support. It's good of you. Thank you very much.
All right, let's bring in the media commentator and former editor of the Sunday Mirror, Paul Connew. Paul, it's always good to have you on the show. Thanks for making the time. I mean, first, just react, if you can, to that little video that he's put on social media. What do you make of that?
Well, it's a strange one because he doesn't actually deny anything. He merely sort of thanks people for messages of support. But it's a fascinating situation because the BBC, once again, although he works for is freelance working for an outside production company, people think of him, the public perception is he's part of the BBC. And the BBC have to be acutely aware of that, especially after the run they've actually had, you know, with Hugh Edwards and of course, and others, including Jermaine Janus. So it's becoming a real problem for the BBC. This in the court of public opinion, and I suspect that they may have other complaints coming in. But 13 people over 17 years, it's a difficult situation to see how he can survive as a BBC star, albeit a freelance one.
Yeah, well, he stepped down, but I think the show has still got a few episodes to run of this latest series.
Well, it'd be difficult, as it's a competition show, to actually suddenly can, pre-recorded material. So I think the BBC are caught there by their, that impossible situation. So but whether they make any comments when those shows go out on the screen or some statement, on text or on voiceover, it would be quite interesting.
Yeah.
But what intrigues me, though, is Kirsty Walk's, 2013 appearance. Did she report it to anybody at the BBC when she was so disturbed by his alleged sexualised remarks, jokes, or not? And tonight, of course, it's a very busy news day generally, but the BBC felt obliged to lead the 6 o'clock TV news, with the Gregg Wallace story, in fact, and making a heavy point of the fact that it's been a BBC News investigation that's brought this to light. But whether the public are convinced by that, I don't know. The problem, as I said before, is that he is perceived to be a BBC star, albeit he is a freelance and employed by a production company who make MasterChef.
Yeah. I mean, Paul, I guess for Miss Walker, who she spoke to at the time may well come to light in the coming days. But, I mean, you talk about the sort of court of public opinion, Paul. I mean, I guess many in the public will be seeing this news today and thinking, another one. How can this be happening again?
Exactly. Well, I'm the editor who, going back as far as 1994, tried to expose Jimmy Savile until I was legally thwarted on it. But what's emerged since then, I've been involved in Sky documentaries and others on the Savile case. Once again, the BBC will lax slow in investigating. A star, OK, Savile was essentially on the BBC staff, but even so, it goes back that far. Where, if you like, there have been serious failures or where big stars have not been investigated when allegations have been made in a proactive sense.
I mean, big difference, though, wouldn't it be that, you know, the things about Jimmy Savile, criminal behaviour, there's nothing that suggests criminality in this instance here with Gregg Wallace. But
this one, I think it's going to, unless something else emerges, it's going to be, if you like, inappropriate behaviour, lewd language, etc. But not.
But Paul, it's the power dynamic, isn't it? As you were just
sexual assaults, anything like that. It's if you like, it's bad taste and offensive behaviour and language. Of course, there was the incident
Paul,
in 2018.
Yeah, but my question is about the power dynamic, really, because as I say, you know, the public were thinking this, it's another one, more high-profile men abusing their position of power. I mean, the industry obviously has a problem, and I wonder if someone like you who observes all of this, where do you see this ending? How do you see it being dealt with?
It's a recurring problem. The climate has changed, and I think more victims are now prepared to come forward. I mean, I was speaking of the BBC. I was involved in the Al Fayed investigation, in which the BBC didn't involve obviously a BBC person, but it was some fine public interest journalism by the BBC, and I was pleased and proud to be involved in that one. But that again showed the same pattern. It's where powerless victims, usually young women, but not always, are afraid to speak out and intimidated. And I think, and if you look at the allegations, albeit they're denied in this case, back in 2018, a young BBC female employee complained about if you like, sexual remarks by Gregg Wallace, alleged, and by him allegedly, again, taking his shirt off in front of her. Now, he says he was cleared by that, but that begs the question, it's going to be asked again and again, I think, you know, were the BBC satisfied with that? Was he really cleared, or did they just give him a bit of a ticking off and leave it at that? An open question, yet to be answered.
Lots of questions waiting to be answered. All right, Paul, really good to speak with Paul Conyer there, media commentator, former editor of the Sunday Mirror. It's always good to get your thoughts, Paul. Thanks.
Pleasure.
All right, well, still to come here on the UK Tonight. Pensioners in Scotland get their full winter fuel allowance reinstated. Will Westminster follow suit? Also ahead, who is to blame for record levels of migration? We'll take a look at the numbers. And the non-league football club that's had a little help with their away stand.
First Minister, how are you?
Good morning. Good morning.
Nice to see you. How are you feeling?
Looking forward to getting into the parliamentary chamber.
Are you any further forward to making a decision?
No, it's an important day today.
All of the claims were in line with my parliamentary duties, so I'm making that clear to you, Conor.
He was a Scot through and through.
He was a very good politician.
Alex Salmond was controversial, he was a disruptor, but above all, he was respected.
Will you resign if you lose this week?
Again, I'm not planning to, of course, lose the vote of no confidence. I'm planning to win that vote of no confidence.
His face said it all.
My intention to stand down as party leader.
This is now a storm with deadly consequences. How are they feeling?
They're a bit scared at the minute.
We've been told to evacuate. How are you feeling?
Devastated.
Hundreds of homes were wiped out by flooding. I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent.
It was probably the darkest time in my life.
Scott is 5 years sober after a cocaine addiction left him close to death. Scotland has a shameful record, worse than England, the worst in Europe.
Why not just say you've failed? Because then you might get more respect from families who've lost loved ones.
This is where one of the UK's most prolific rapists thought he'd got away with murder.
Sky News can reveal that former sex workers had told police he was sexually violent.
My Emma.
Free wherever you get your news.
It's over, isn't it?
The Americans say he is Rossi, a fraudster.
This has been one of the most bizarre cases ever heard in a courtroom in this country.
A dangerous murderer.
Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive Andrew Ennis after this?
She said she can forgive him, but as long as he's behind bars.
By doing the right thing, it's destroyed your life.
They terrorised me. They intimidated me.
Sky News, the full story first.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away.
So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Welcome back. Now, the Scottish Government has reignited the row over the winter fuel allowance by announcing it'll reintroduce the payments for all pensioners in Scotland next year. Now, the benefit will help an estimated 900,000 people, having been abolished by the UK government when Labour came to power in July. And in a further blow to the government, the Unite Union, one of Labour's biggest party donors, has confirmed it's going ahead with its legal action to try and overturn the cuts. Well, our Scotland correspondent Conor Gillies has been speaking to pensioners in Glasgow.
I'm a rich pensioner, so I don't get anything. I get all my pensions.
Well, as a rich pensioner, you'll still get this payment. This
fine.
payment will come back.
That's fine.
But as a rich pensioner, do you think you should get it?
Yes. Because I've worked hard all my life, so I'm entitled to it. But as long as they don't take that away.
Your bus pass?
The bus pass, you know. Because I don't need my private jet anymore.
I think they should bring it back.
Aye, for the older people, aye. Because they'll need it while the bills get up dead high and all that.
If they're bringing it back, I'd be very pleased about that because obviously I'm going to be able to accept that and do something with it.
It seems like it was all done political, you know, standard. But it's good that they've brought it back. I think people will really appreciate it.
Well, let's speak now to the Charity Director for Age UK, Caroline Abrams. Caroline Abrams, thanks so much for making the time to speak with us this evening. Now, we've seen the Scottish Government are going to bring it back. What do they realise, do you think, that the UK Government, the Westminster Government, doesn't?
Good evening. I think two things, really. Firstly, that the decision to brutally ration the winter fuel payment has been very unpopular with older people and other members of the public. It's very unpopular. But secondly, that all the evidence shows that lots of older people who really need it this winter are going to lose it. So it's very encouraging that the Scottish Government's made this decision. And, of course, has the government in Northern Ireland, which leaves the Westminster Government looking a bit isolated and I think under pressure to reconsider its decision.
Now, in the past, you've called the decision by Westminster a political error. I mean, they would say it was an economic one. It's going to save £1.3 billion in the years 24 to 25, £1.5 billion in subsequent years. So with, as they tell us, that £22 billion black hole, they've got to try and balance the books.
We have every sympathy for the government in trying to stabilise the country's finances, and they've got a difficult job to do. We completely accept that. But this was the wrong decision because essentially it's going to make poor pensioners poorer. And they really can't withstand this kind of cut, not at the very little notice that's been given to them. It's this winter that really worries what's going to happen, you know, through December, January, February, when traditionally the weather gets at its coldest in this country. And lots of older people we know are going to be worried about running their heating, turning it down, economising on hot water, not having so many baths, eating sandwiches. And I think that's really bad for their health and bad for the NHS. And it's unacceptable, really, in our society.
Caroline, look, there's been plenty of anger since it was announced. I mean, it was announced way before the budget, wasn't it? It was announced back in the summer. Plenty of petitioning. I mean, I wonder if Age UK have had any conversations with the government. There's no sense, is there, that they're looking to reverse this? What are the conversations like that you are having?
The decision was clearly made by the Treasury and obviously supported by the whole government because that's how politics works. But we haven't had any further discussions with the Treasury of late. We talked to the Department for Work and Pensions, whose job it is to implement this policy, and who clearly, even on some figures published today by the government, are struggling because the system wasn't built to get lots and lots of people applying for pension credit all at once. For some people, they're experiencing really long delays. And unfortunately, all the people who are applying, half of them aren't finding themselves to be eligible for the money. And then there's nothing for them. And of course, that's the difference that we now see in Scotland, where on one side of the road in Scotland, you're going to have people who have got some extra help. And on the other side in England, there are people who are going to go without.
So tell us, what are your concerns then for pensioners coming this winter? And how many do we think are going to be impacted by this?
Very hard to tell overall, but we estimated a while ago maybe 2 million older people who were really going to struggle without the money. And I think that's borne out by all the contacts we've had with older people. The prices have gone up for energy, as many of your viewers will know, by 40% over the last few years. So suddenly, we're really scared of winter for lots of people, particularly older people who do need to stay warm. And I think what's distinctive about our older population is that many of them are very, very reluctant to go into debt. So rather than running their heating to stay warm and worrying about the bill afterwards, they self-ration. So they turn it down, they take steps to avoid building up that kind of problem. And then they get cold, and then they get ill, and that's really bad for them, and it's really bad for the rest of us too.
Absolutely. OK, Caroline Abrahams from Age UK, really thank you for being with us this evening. Thank you. All right. Well, still to come on the UK tonight, the Prime Minister has accused the Tories of running an open borders experiment, as revised figures show a record number of people came to the UK last year. We'll have the details. Now, the Prime Minister has accused the Conservatives of running an open border experiment after revised figures revealed net migration hit a record high in 2023. So Keir Starmer said the last government's approach left the economy hopelessly reliant on immigration. Now, the numbers are eye-watering. It had previously been thought that 740,000 more people came here to the UK than left the country in 2023's figures. Well, that was upgraded to 906,000. That is more than the population of Leeds. The figures for the year to June this year fell to 728,000, but that was still close to the previous record. Our political editor, Beth Rigby, reports.
He may be smiling, but the news serious. Net migration figures shockingly high. A PM perhaps relieved it's not on his watch.
Nearly 1 million people came to Britain in the year ending June 2023. That is 4 times the migration levels compared with 2019. Time and again, the Conservative Party promised they would get the numbers down. Time and again, they failed.
This, for many, a Brexit betrayal. This PM promising to turn the page.
Failure on this scale isn't just bad luck. Policies were reformed deliberately to liberalise immigration. Brexit was used for that purpose, to turn Britain into a one-nation experiment in open borders.
Announcing a new security agreement with Iraq to deter migrants and a promise to drive immigration down. People feel incredibly let down by their politicians. You say you want to bring it down. What does that mean?
Beth, when you say people have been let down, you're absolutely right, because they were promised by the last government that it would get control of our borders, and we had a government that completely lost control of our borders. And these numbers, this 4-time increase, that wasn't just bad luck post-Brexit, that was their policy.
The PM not the only one at a podium today. Reform's Nigel Farage out too, berating the Tories' record in government while telling the public that Labour are even worse. Keir Starmer says he has a plan to drive down migration and has made that commitment. Are you saying that because actually you need Labour to fail on migration in order to try and improve your chances at the next general election?
The incoming Labour government said there would be fewer cross-channel migrants going into hotels. We learned this morning that number has increased by 6,000 just since Labour came to power. And on the broader question of who can come into the country and settle, they seem to be wholly unconcerned on that issue.
But there is concern, huge concern. In 2023, the UK population grew by almost 1 million people through migration. That's more than 3 times the population of Derby in the East Midlands. And in this refugee centre, volunteers are seeing it.
We have seen great increases, but the last 6 months it's been steady, but at a much higher level than it was 2 or 3 years ago.
Local people are noticing the change too.
Derby has changed so much. Everybody seems to be just ignoring the fact that they're here. Our economy won't last forever. They can't rely on us forever.
The people here voted for Brexit, but instead of taking back control, migration has hit record highs. It isn't Labour's legacy, but it is now their problem to fix. Beth Rigby, Sky News.
All right, let's speak with the UK's first independent Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration, John Vine, and Mike Padgham from the Independent Care Group. Mike, John, thanks both for being with us. I'm going to start with you, John, if I can. You left your job as the Inspector of Borders and Immigration early in 2014. From what you've heard from the reporting today, has much changed, apart from the numbers going up?
Well, I think a great deal has changed. The numbers have gone up exponentially. 10 years ago, the net migration figure was about 300,000, just over 300,000 in that year. 5 years ago, it was down to just over 200,000. And so the advent of Brexit has made a great difference, because from that point, the government has no excuses. It's completely in control of UK borders. It decides how many people get visas and what for. what skills shortages there are in the UK that need filling with labour from overseas. And what we're talking about today, let's be clear, is legal migration to the UK. These are people who've been given visas to come and study in Britain, work in Britain, visit family, etc. And I think the thing that concerns me as much as anything else is that the government and everybody else is really surprised by it. Surely, if the government has a strategy around migration, legal migration, then they should know why people are coming here, for what purpose, and have a clear idea and a debate with the public about what that total number should be in any particular year.
Mike, let me bring you in at this point. I mean, when you saw these numbers, what was your reaction? And talk to us about the care sector and how you're impacted by recruiting from overseas.
Well, I wasn't surprised that the figures had come down because the previous government had changed the rules on not allowing overseas staff to bring their dependents with them. So that did make a big difference. But the sad issue is that we are very short of social care staff in England. Currently, even with the overseas staff, we're 131,000 short. And figures show by 2040, to cope with the population that needs care, we need a further 540,000 staff. Now, I'm not sure where these staff are coming from. The Prime Minister says he wants staff in this country to work in social care, but despite our best efforts, we cannot attract the numbers in that we need. So it's a big problem.
Mike, how many sort of British people born here do you get applying for the jobs that you were aware of in the care sector?
Well, you could say that you get several or tens applying for one particular post in a particular provider. But the challenge is you don't know how many of those are coming from overseas or from this country. One of the key things is that when we do hold the interviews, not everyone in this country wants to work the unsocial hours. They want child-friendly hours. They don't always want the challenges of working perhaps Christmas and Easter or overnight. And again, despite our efforts, we cannot attract enough people in. Now, it's commonly known social care is a very poorly paid profession. One of the big challenges for the government is about addressing the pay issue. I know we've got the Fair Pay Agreement coming, but that is at least 2 years away. And we need to start now, this weekend, tonight. And I don't see an answer unless the government can move some funding from the NHS into social care so we can pay staff more in this country and help balance it out. But I'm a great believer. We do need some staff from overseas. They bring a lot of extra diversity to this country, and I think they play a valuable part.
John, I want to bring you in. We haven't got loads of time, but I do want to talk about the pay issue, because you may have heard earlier an acknowledgement from the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, that the pay threshold that was changed, obviously, people had to be paid over to be able to come to the country, was set too low. The Prime Minister suggested earlier that was a bit of a deliberate strategy. This is part of his idea that it was some kind of open door strategy. I mean, is the Prime Minister right? Was the threshold too low, do you think?
Well, the last government and this government are advised by a panel of experts called the Migration Advisory Committee. And they're brought in to advise any government on where the skills shortages are and then what needs to be done to fill those skills shortages. So as part of that, the last government increased the threshold for skilled workers, particularly in the care sector. Now, as we know, as has been pointed out by the other guests on your programme, universities need the money from overseas students, and the social care sector needs the labour that can be provided by workers from overseas in order to make sure that we have decent services. If, on the other hand, you're concerned about high migration and you want to cut down on, for example, as the government did, on dependents being brought in by those people, then you have the short-term benefit of being able to say that you've got reduced migration figures, but the long-term disbenefit of not having the staff who are willing and capable to do the jobs that Mike has suggested we need so desperately.
John, I want to give...
It's this balancing act that the new government has to address. So it talks about having a serious and credible plan to deal with this. Well, we need to see what that serious and credible plan is, and we need to see when they hope to achieve improvements in the situation, and how many people do they want to see coming to Britain, for example, in the next year?
Well, John, that was my final question, and I haven't got loads of time, so answer that for me if you can, then. What is the acceptable level of net migration, then?
Well, that's not for me to say. It's for the government to have a public discourse. And so when these figures are produced in future, then people are less outraged by it because they'll say, yes, that is the level of migration we need in order to, keep our services in the UK going.
OK. All right. John Vine, Mike Padgham, thanks both. Really good to speak with you guys. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. All right, well, still to come on the UK tonight, how a trolley park has led to a non-league football ground becoming famous the world over.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends.
We've got a heck of a race.
This is when the Premier League properly clicks into gear. With the reigning champions against perhaps their most likely challengers.
Liverpool, Manchester City.
The summit meeting of English football's top two.
Liverpool, Manchester City on USA.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry.
It is an anti-woman agenda. Sky News, get the full story first. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Can you beat Donald Trump, Governor? President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Free, wherever you get your news.
I've had severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
Welcome back. Now, David is here with the sport. David, great to have you with us. And look, Frank Lampard has got another job in football.
He absolutely does. And it's back in the Championship. We started his managerial career. He's been appointed head coach at Coventry City. This is a really fascinating situation. He signed a 2.5-year contract. He says he's refreshed and ready to go because he's been out of football for 18 months or so. But the pressure is very much on Frank Lampard, who replaces Mark Robins. Now, Mark Robins is one of the greatest managers in Coventry's history. Yep. He took them to a Championship playoff final last season, now also to an FA Cup semi-final. You might remember this game. They were 3-0 down against Manchester United, fought back to 3-3.
Incredible.
What a game. Almost won it in extra time as well.
Coventry City fans still think they did win it, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Then they obviously lost on penalties. But he's been headhunted by Doug King, who is the Coventry owner. But they're 17th. They're 2 points above the relegation zone. First game on Saturday at home to another struggling side, Cardiff City. So, yes, 2.5-year contract. He's back in football and hoping to rebuild his career after what happened at Chelsea and Everton before then. So we'll see how he goes. Plenty more to tell you in terms of football and tonight's European action.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
you got more chance winning the lottery than making it as a professional footballer.
I think your responsibility is to guide them in the same direction as I went myself.
Things aren't just handed to you on a plate. I think you have to fight for them, and it's probably only the tough that survive, really.
Natural skills is not enough. The impact has to be straight away.
Don't let anyone tell you what you can and can't do.
If you have that belief, then that's the most important thing.
Keep it fun for as long as possible. If you love what you do, you'll be able to get through the tougher times.
If you're going to make it as a professional, pressure's coming, so we don't want the kids feeling it.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Now, we like to leave you with something a little weird and wonderful here on the UK Tonight, and tonight's no exception. A non-league football club in Nottinghamshire is winning over fans all over the world because of their slightly unusual away end. Teversal FC, near Sutton in Ashfield, houses visiting supporters in old Tesco trolley shelters and has done so for 20 years. How nice. It's recently taken social media by storm, with people all over the country visiting the ground to stand in the stands. And, of course, when you're trying to stay dry watching non-league football, every little helps. Oh, very good. All right, well, I'm pleased to say I'm joined by the club secretary, Kevin Newton. Kevin, thanks so much for making the time. We haven't got loads of time. What gave you the idea to cover the opposition supporters with a Tesco trolley cover?
It was a case that we got a promotion up to an higher standard and we had to improve the facilities at the ground. And one of those was to have floodlights. And when we had the floodlights, we went to the base where they was made to actually see how they operated effectively. And the trolley park stands, as they are now, they're ready to go to the tip.
Wow, they're just going to throw them away. I mean, I was thinking before I was speaking to you, what else you could get donated to try and make, a full sort of stadium seating. Have you thought about maybe an old bus shelter with at least have a bench in there?
Yeah, we've actually seen them, believe it or not, used as dugouts at different times. So, yeah, there's different things. We've got a stand-up as well, so which we've built on and made it into a proper stand. So we're a little stadium now, and it's ways to help us to move forward.
Good for you guys. And you're attracting a lot of attention from all over the world.
That's right. I mean, it comes through the ground hoppers who come watching non-league football. They come round, and the big thing for us really is it's got generated the interest because of its quickness, as you say. And yes, we have had people coming from new places to visit us.
All right, final thought then, Kevin. How are you doing in the league this season?
Not very well, unfortunately. We sit bottom of the league at the moment, but we've just appointed a new management team that hopefully will get us out of trouble this year, and we'll stay at Step 7, or regional feeder leagues as we're in, and then hopefully start looking at getting back up to the national feeder league.
All right, Kevin, we'll wish you and the team all the best, and thanks so much for joining us this evening. It's really good to talk to you, Kevin. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, well, that's all from the team on UK Tonight. You can catch the highlights on our webpage. You can scan the QR code on screen. Coming up next is Gillian Joseph with The World.